Well, good evening, everybody. I hope everybody enjoyed Jennifer's live. I thought it was amazing. She did a great job. I'm really glad she's back, and I'm glad she's back doing what she's great at, and I really enjoyed it. I hope everybody that went over there enjoyed it too. Um, Sort of running out of thumbnail ideas here, but yeah, so I'm just doing an informal live. What I originally had wanted to do was I originally wanted to read a little bit of my audiobook tonight, but since it's kind of late now, I'm probably just going to do that tomorrow, read my audiobook. I'm just going to do a little bit of an informal live because it doesn't take a lot of anything to do. See, when I read, I have to get into uh, storyteller mode so that I can, do some of the sound effects and everything else I normally do when I read and get into character for, reading the parts from the people in the audiobook stories. So I don't know. I probably won't do that tonight. I guess I'll just do that tomorrow. But yeah, hey Miriam, how you doing? Yeah, good to see you. Yeah, Jennifer's live was really good tonight. I really enjoyed that. Unfortunately, my phone died while I was on panel, so I had to plug it in and get back on there. Hey Romero, what's going on, buddy? Yeah, everything is nice and good tonight. I was really happy about her live. I really am. Like that really lifted my spirits. To see her back up there. Hey Heather. But yeah, I was just going to talk about some things, normal topics I cover since, I'm going to kind of do an informal thing tonight. Yeah, it's great to see everybody here. It's great to see everybody. I'm glad to see everybody. I hope everybody was over at Jennifer's and they had a good live with her over there. But yeah, I wanted to discuss some things. I just wanted to talk about, standard stuff, mostly things that are going on right now as far as the psyops, because again, there's a lot of psychological operations taking place right now. People live in this false, phony paradigm, but believe it or not, believe it or not, there is going to be a paradigm shift. And what I mean by that is I mean that when there's a collapse, and there is going to be a collapse, mixed in with all the overreach, mixed in with the false flagaroonies and cheese, you know what those are, mixed in with everything else, mixed in with a weakened central regime who has these puny, woke, depleted forces that can't hold down Jack and shit, and Jack just left town, so you know what that means. Yeah. Basically, it's going to look exactly like in the documentary. That map I made is going to look exactly like that. They don't have the personnel or the resources. I'm a straight up nerd. I got to talk about all this stuff. I got to. I got to. This is my thing. This is my topic. So, they don't have the resources or the logistics necessary to hold down such a vast nation of our vast, gigantic size. They just don't have it. Over 4 million miles of roads, well in excess of 3 million square miles. If you broke down the 2.2 million personnel and you divvied it up per square mile, you'd still have over 1 million square miles where you couldn't fit one person per square mile. So it's like all this stuff that they're saying to scare people is complete utter nonsense. It's total nonsense. They're not going to go after anybody because they can't. They can't. All they can do is they can make their little examples, they can make their little examples to scare some people, or they could do some high profile stuff now, like what they did with Trumpty Dumpty. Like they can do all these either high profile or they can make examples. Like they can go find somebody to either play the part of getting harassed or whatever they decide they're doing to try to scare people. They can either find a role player, because they do have crisis actors now. Don't you all forget that. They do have crisis actors. So they can either get people to play the roles of being oppressed, or they can get or they could just find somebody that's a complete total cuckold, somebody that they know isn't going to protect themselves, or they're just a pushover and they're going to allow themselves to be, run over by some evil tyrants. Like that's who they look for. That's who they pick on. They pick on the weak. and which is deplorable and disgusting. It is deplorable. It's totally disgusting that they seek out weak people to pick on. I just find that as a total abomination. You know, it's an abomination unto me because I hate injustice. I hate injustice. I totally hate seeing innocent or at least, you know, decent, normal people getting mistreated or abused. Nobody likes to see that. I mean, not unless you're a complete sociopath, but that's basically who they have running things right now. So they got these total sociopaths running everything, and they're totally running it all into the ground, you know. And the worst thing about it is these people have no idea that they're about to be basically just lose everything they have too. They're just being used. They get used and they get kicked to the curb. You know, that's like a steady thing. Like they don't care about their stooges that go out and do their dirty work or their heavy lifting for them. They don't care about their stooges. They're stooges. They're stooges. They're thugs and they're enforcers. They don't understand that when the system ends, they're going to go with it because they're not going to have no more paycheck because the system's been basically destroyed. And that goes for whether it's China and Russia invading us or it goes for whether there's a collapse. You know, once there's a collapse and those people can't be paid, you know they're all going to go home. You know it's the truth. You know they're all going to go home. Now, what did they do in my internal conflict hypothetical scenario documentary? What did they do? They ended up having to work for food. They had to risk their lives for food. When they raised up woke militias, because they were so low on manpower, they would really do that too. You know they would really do that. You know they would. You know they would. They would get their little wokester loyalists and they'd try to give them arms, and you know that they would like use them as like human wave assault forces so that they could save their better forces for the real fighting. You know, they would throw like what the Iranians did to the Iraqis in the Iran-Iraq war. They threw their little militias ahead of their actual regular army so that they could bear the brunt of the artillery and the minefields and everything else, so that the tanks could follow behind them and the armored forces of the regular army and do all the real fighting. And that was a very, very brutal conflict. That was one hell of a war of attrition. And a war of attrition means that both sides inflict attrition on each other to see, you know, who can withstand the most. You know, that's when, you know, Iran and Iraq basically threw everything they had at each other, and the kitchen sink. You know, even Saddam had to resort to VX nerve agent shells that we sold him. We sold him that stuff. He didn't make it. We sold that to him. So, you know, he had to rely on chemical weapons to annihilate 200,000 Iranian troops in one single day. In one day. So think about it. In the Al-Faw Peninsula, what had occurred was the Iranians, they crossed the river, right? You know, they crossed the that little channel right there. It's dang, I can't think of the name of it. It's the Shat al-Arab. The Shat al-Arab. They crossed the Shat al-Arab waterway, and they seized the Al-Faw Peninsula from Saddam Hussein. And Qasr was the port city, and it's basically Iraq's only access to the sea, because otherwise it's basically just a landlocked desert, mostly. You know, I mean, they got palm forests and things like that. They got mountains in some parts, but for the most part, it's a landlocked desert and alluvial plains. Alluvial plains means they have river plains, like plains along the rivers where they can farm and grow things. Well, it's mostly just a landlocked nation, in other words, minus the Al-Faw Peninsula. Now, they had Qasr, which is their port city, where they exported oil. Now, they depended heavily on Qasr. So what happened instead was, to get the oil out of the country, they had to ship it through Kuwait, because Kuwait wasn't involved directly in the war. They were neutral in name only, but they really helped Iraq, but at a price. They scalped Iraq for tariffs on their oil, but by crossing through Kuwait to sell it. So when the Iranians had Qasr and they took over the Al-Fal Peninsula, Saddam had to get it back. So what he did was he blocked off the land exit to the peninsula, because it's basically surrounded by water on three ways. So the Iranians were trapped. And then he just shelled them relentlessly with VX nerve shells and sprayed them with planes and dropped, chemical airdropped ordinances. And he just gassed the living hell out of them. And he killed 200,000 in one single day. In one day. That's like a fifth of the whole Iranian military at that moment. So that's what brought Ayatollah Khomeini to the peace table. Because if you lose about a fifth of your whole army in just one day, in one single day, yeah, that's going to bring you to the peace table. So where am I going with all of that? Well, where I'm going with all of that is back to the whole internal conflict thing, which I modeled heavily off of the Syrian civil war. Interesting thing was in Jennifer's live, they were talking about Damascus and, Damascus being destroyed, a ruinous heap. Well, guess what, everybody? It basically already is, Prophecy basically already has come true in a sense, because if you look at Damascus from satellite photos, that place is a heap of ruins. That city is utterly ruined. That place has been annihilated by everything from rockets to tank shells to artillery shells and everything in between, missiles, rockets of all kinds, homemade or military grade. They've totally annihilated that city. That city is a ruinous heap. And I modeled my Second American Internal Conflict documentary series I created, the Hypothetical. I modeled that heavily off of the events in Syria. Also other internal conflicts from around the world, sprinkled in for a little bit of diversity, since America is a melting pot that became a chamber pot. So that's basically, in a sense, that was the whole thing, so what happened was the military fractured. It fractured into multiple pieces. You had the Free American Army getting a large bulk of the Guard and reserves, but then you had places like Texas and Florida getting their own states' reserve forces and guardsmen. Then you had the NSRF getting some of them, and then you had the rest of the factions getting the rest. And the regime kept mostly their woke active forces, most of them. So what you ended up having was you had the military fracture into 10 different directions. They fractured into 10 parts because they went to each of the 10 factions in the hypothetical. Now, what do we see in real life? Well, you see all these threats to axe these troops for not partaking in the mark of the beast. For their refusal to take the mark of the beast in their arm, they're being threatened with being kicked out. Now, that's the equivalent of 8 entire Corps-sized military units. A corps can be as big as 25,000 at the smallest end, or as big as 45,000 at the higher end. Normally, they're like in the 30s, thousands range. But let's just say that, 260,000, that would be about 8 corps, like right on the money just about. So 8 entire corps-sized units. That's insane. But that right there is eerily similar, is it not? That's eerily similar to my scenario. And that's happening in our present reality. That looks like the future Free American Army to me, or maybe parts of other factions to me. What if those troops left the military and they took everything they had with them? What if they did? Who would stop them? Who would stop 8 entire corps, their leadership and their troops and everything else, from taking everything they had and splintering off and joining up with whatever kooks or free radicals or whatever else arises out of the mist, out of the swamp, out of the bog, whatever's been hiding in the deep, I'll just put it that way. Whatever's been hiding in the deep, hiding and plotting and planning for the day that there would be a power vacuum to be filled upon a collapse. Because when you have a bunch of different people coming out of the woodwork in the worst possible time, as far as a collapse and the all the unrest it would cause and all the breakdowns and everything else that people take for granted would be gone. It would all be gone. So then you would have a bunch of desperate people doing desperate things. This whole entire society, there would be a social collapse. Obviously, the economic, food, fuel, logistical, and currency collapse. So the currency would be worthless. But like when I showed you in the documentary, I showed you the very diverse, different economic systems that arose in each of the factional areas. They all had their own form of currency or barter. That is a very real thing. That happened in Syria, too. It happened in Syria. Parts under certain factions in Syria developed their own systems for everything, their own law systems, their own, codes of conduct, their own ideological systems as far as like their beliefs and everything. They developed their own currencies or barter systems. They did all of that in Syria. They do that in basically every internal conflict known to man. Different areas inside of different geographical regions that are experiencing internal conflicts, whether it's some kind of an empire or whether it's a nation state, whatever you want to call it, any place experiencing an internal conflict, and it's a multi-way conflict, meaning you have multiple different sides, each with their own ideologies, their own beliefs, their own private armies, their own everything. They're all going to develop their own systems. See, people don't understand that the left-right paradigm is a completely globalist created paradigm. It's an illusion. It's smoke and mirrors, and it's going to fall apart along with everything else. People think that the internal conflict is going to be a left-right thing. No, it's not. No, it's not. There's going to be a new paradigm. There's going to be a new paradigm because of all the things that have lined up to create a new paradigm. I have studied these different things so intently as far as like the wars around the world and how the different sides did things in these different conflicts. I have studied all this stuff so intently. This is like my area of expertise that I could be like a professor in if I were to teach this as a college or university course or something. The documentaries I make, yeah, they're low budget, but wow, if you really have the patience to sit through those, you can learn a lot about this type of stuff. You can learn a lot about it. If you're paying attention and you want to learn about it for real, and you sit through it, you're going to learn all kinds of things about how the dynamics work, how the mechanics work. And when I say mechanics, I mean about how armies work. Different types of armies. Like whether it's your irregulars, they call them irregulars, which are like militias or like your whatever you want to call them, partisans, militias, insurgents, guerrillas, whatever. You have irregulars. Then you have regular armies, like regular military. Then you have like your veteran type of forces that would be like, like in the NSRF, how they had their core forces, or in the Mormon state, they had their Joseph Smith Zone, which were like their either their former combat veterans of the two previous wars or other conflicts, and mixed in with the Guard units, like the National Guard of Utah and Colorado. So there you go. You had your Joseph Smith Zone. That was like a combo of your regulars and your veteran sorts of forces, where they amalgamated into one single entity, and in military terms. And then I showed how the mechanics worked with the logistical systems, how they transported supplies, what sorts of supplies they used, how they burned through their supplies, how they got more, where they stored supplies. I showed how certain airports were used to import logistics with prop planes, because prop planes don't spend as much fuel typically as larger aircraft do, like your jet aircraft. Like supply lines were very complicated throughout that documentary. They were very complicated because you have to remember, as the resources ran low, so did their methods of transport. At the very beginning, they had access to trains. True enough, they had access to trains because there was still just enough diesel, just enough at the rail yards and inside the trains themselves. They had just enough to where they could launch a few really big offensives. As far as like the NSRF, how they use their rail networks to bring forces into the Warren Air Force Base in Cheyenne area so they could build up their forces to fight the Mormon state, who basically had overrun much of Colorado. They basically used a large portion of their fuel to enter Denver and basically blitz Denver and take it over and take over all the surrounding areas before engulfing the whole military area along I-25 of your Pueblo Depot, where the chemical weapons were, and your Cheyenne Mountain, and your where NORAD is, and your Air Force Academy, and also Fort Carson. I almost went to Fort Carson. When I was in the Army, I almost went to Fort Carson, but at the last minute, my orders got changed to Fort Hood. They got changed to Fort Hood. But you know what? I'm glad I ended up in good old Texas. I love it here. I really ended up really loving it here. I love Texas. I really do. This is a great place. Overall, it's just a cool place to be. I really enjoy it here. I wouldn't want to be anywhere else. Let me tell you something. I would never go back up north. I would never live up north ever again. Not ever again. As beautiful as the terrain is up there, and it is beautiful, it almost reminds me of Europe, because when I was a foreign exchange student to Germany, for the summer, when we went over there, it really, really looked a lot like home. I mean, as far as like the scenery goes, as far as the woods and the types of trees they have, the terrain, the rolling hills, it really looked a lot like southeastern Pennsylvania in a lot of ways. Only in Pennsylvania you have corn instead of wheat. Over in Europe and in Germany, they grow a lot of wheat fields. And also in Rhineland-Pfalz, which was the part of Germany I was in, it was like one of their states. They have 16 states, like we have 50. Well, Rhineland-Pfalz is a state that's in western Germany, adjacent to France, and they grow a lot of grape vineyards there. It's really beautiful. It's a really beautiful area. I was in Landkreis Bad Kreuznach, which is a county. Landkreis means county, and Bad Kreuznach was like their county seat, like their county, like their main city in their county, for their municipality. But it was beautiful over there. It reminded me a lot of the Northeast. But I would never move back up there ever again after the way they've changed things there. It's just utterly, completely, totally not even the same place that I remember growing up in. But now that I'm here in Texas, I sure love it here. I really do. I wouldn't want to be anywhere else. But back to what I was discussing as far as the developments, So you have these, oh, hey, Jen. Hey, sweetheart. And as far as the developments, you have all these different things going on as far as the psyops and how they're trying to deceive people. And you got to understand, yes, a lot of people might still buy into some of it, but the good news is there are a lot of people, there really are a lot of people that have figured out the psyops, and they've gotten away from the two-party paradigm, the false paradigm that is the two-party paradigm. Now, sure, yeah, they're going to continue to try to milk that paradigm for all they can get from it. True enough, they will. They will try to milk that paradigm to get people as angry as they can. All the really gullible people that still believe that politics is real, like they probably still believe in the Easter rabbit, the Ishtar rabbit, and Satan Claus, Santa. The anagram of Satan is Santa, but they probably believe in all that too. If they still believe that Democrats and Republicans are real things, they're about as legitimate as the Tooth Fairy. They're like WWF actors. They're all actors. The acting community is very closely linked to the political establishment, because why? How do you think you can be a WWF wrestler and then you can become president? What the hell is that? I mean, seriously, what the hell is that? Or, you got Ronald Reagan, an actor, in movies, he's a film actor. And how does a film actor run a country? Like, look at Zelensky over there, in that certain country. He's an actor too. Look at how these actors get jobs in the political establishments of Western or Westernized nations. It's only in Western nations or Westernized nations because Ukraine wanted to join the West. They wanted to be a part of the West, but all they ended up doing was getting shafted by the West, and they did because they ended up being a Western proxy that Russia and the East have been destroying. And I say the East, I include Russia, China, the whole bloc, Iran, Pakistan, the whole Eurasian bloc. They're the direct competitor of the, WEF, the Western Economic Forum. All of that will be destroyed. The Western Economic Forum and the Western elites will all be destroyed because just like in Deuteronomy 28, when God judges a nation, he judges it from its highest elites all the way to its lowest bums. And that includes the Western elites. They will be Xi Jinping's footstool. They will, or they'll be his slaves, just like the rest of the people. And that's just the way it is. That's the way it's going to be. These people don't escape judgment. These elites, they're not going to escape judgment. And, even Xi Jinping and Putin, they'll get theirs at the end of time, too, because they're going to be of, two of the 10 kings, the 10 Eastern kings that rule with the beast after World War III. They will be, because especially China being the new world superpower, and then Russia being the number 2. So, they're going to be of the 10 kings. They're going to be 2 of them. So, they're going to have other allies, of course, as other 8 of the 10 kings. And I'm firmly convinced of that, and I can't be convinced otherwise by this point, because of all I've found out, everything I've researched has led to that. And it doesn't even go against the Bible. In fact, it confirms it. It confirms it. It just confirms it. The real New World Order is going to be an Eastern New World Order, because the West gets destroyed. It gets colonized. It's out of the picture. It's gone. It's going to be destroyed. Hey, Rebecca, great to see you. Yeah, Heather. Yeah, he's an actor. He's just a WWF, wrestling champ or whatever he is, I always think of him slamming Vince McMahon on that table, and I just think, like, what the hell? Like, no one, how can anyone take this country seriously? I mean, really, that's why we're like the butt of every joke in the world right now. Everybody's laughing at us. We have become a joke. We used to be respected. We used to be powerful, but we're not powerful anymore. All our industries have collapsed. They've all fallen by the wayside. We've got factories just sitting there empty, all the machinery stripped out of them, the walls caving in, ceilings caving in. Can't retool them, can't get new machinery in there if you wanted to. You can't do all that. You need all the specialists and experts and equipment and precision tools. You need all of that stuff. All the stars have to align. You can't just get industry back up and running lickety-split. It don't work like that. And I hate to tell people, but there ain't no one single solitary person that's going to fix the type of, total just, I don't even know what to call this without cursing. This total cluster F that we're in. There's no single solitary leader that can fix this cluster F, this cluster shit. There, I'll just say shit because that's not really a curse word. It's just a synonym of feces or excrement. There's nobody that can get us out of this cluster shit that we're in as a nation. Nobody can get us out of this. Not nobody except Yeshua. But he's not going to get us out of it because we've turned our back on him as a nation, and it's disgusting. Look how people are now. It's disgusting. This whole nation is going down because everybody turned their back on him. I mean, not literally every single solitary person, but you know what I'm saying. If you just look around you, look what's happening to people right now. I don't know if that has to do with the mark of the beast that so many of them took. I'm inclined to believe it. I'm very inclined to believe it. In fact, it's my personal opinion that it is. I'm just going to say it. I believe it with everything of my being, every fiber of my being, that these people are corrupted by the mark because they took that thing in their arm and it's totally corroded and rotted their brains. It has. These people do not think with logic and reasoning and rationality. They're hostile. They'll attack you for no reason, whether it's verbally or otherwise. So you have to be on your guard. You got to be on your defense. You got to be on top of things because you constantly have to watch everything. You got to defend yourself from all these weirdos if they attack you. You have to, these people are just losing their minds left and right. It's a shame. I mean, there is going to come a day, especially in the collapse, when it's not even going to be safe to leave your own home. It's going to be like in Serbia, or not Serbia, I mean Bosnia, when people couldn't even walk out their front doors or they'd get their heads shot off by some kind of a sharpshooter or a sniper. That happened in Bosnia. Imagine how much worse it'll be when it all goes down here. People won't even be able to walk out of their homes safely. You better own some body armor. I've told people where to get it. I've told people how to get it. You need armor. You need a helmet. Get you a helmet that's rated against, most helmets will at least protect you from shrapnel. Even the old steel helmets from like World War II, they'll protect you from most shrapnel. But if you want to get a Kevlar helmet, get one that's rated against, certain pistol ammunition, like the one I have. Here, I'll show you something. This right here, this one, hold on. This right here is actually able to withstand 45 caliber 9mm ball ammunition, like standard 9mm ammo. It can handle standard 9mm. It can handle 380 and everything under as far as caliber size. It can handle regular ball ammunition of like 9mm, and it can handle 45. But it can't take a 40. Like if you shoot a 40 cal at this, like a 40 S&W, it's going to go right through it, So, but you want to get something, because see, most of these aren't really made to take hits from ammunition. This is made to protect your head from shrapnel or falling bricks or whatever. It's made to protect your head from different things. It's not so much against projectiles, although it can. These are rated to protect your head, at least against pistol ammunition. Most of it. There are certain rounds though that just it's not really that effective against. I just thought I would show people that, just sort of, so they understand how vital it is to protect your head and your body. Because when you have a bunch of projectiles flying around or shrapnel, you're going to want to make yourself as bulletproof or as shrapnel-proof as you can. That armor I have, it has collar pieces that you can Velcro up so that it stands up around your neck and kind of protects your neck, so that if there's like shrapnel flying around, it won't fly into your neck and rip a hole in your throat, or something like that. It'll protect your sides, your back, your shoulders, your neck, your head. You're mostly well protected by that point if you get you some full-fledged armor. But the only problem with armor versus a plate carrier, see, plate carriers, they only protect your vital organs, because where the plates they cover your chest area and part of your stomach, like right above, your stomach, your intestines. They protect all of that. But they don't cover all the other areas like full-fledged body armor does. It just covers your vital organs. But it gives you more range of motion. Like you can move a lot easier in a plate carrier than you can in full-blown body armor. But body armor gives you much better protection, like all the way around. So it's all in the preference of the wearer. I mean, body armor can be a lot heavier too, but it gives you more protection, but less free range of movement, whereas plate carriers allow for more free range of movement. Like you can move a lot. You're a lot more nimble. You've got more dexterity when you're wearing a plate carrier versus a full-on body armor. Now, you see me, I'm used to the armor, because I wore it in the Army. So I'm used to carrying all that weight. It's not no big issue for me, but I'm a man. I would imagine that women would probably like plate carriers a lot better, just because they're lighter. They're lighter weight. They're better for their frames, for their body types, for their frames. But either way, it's a lot better to have a plate carrier than to have nothing. I always think that people should be preparing for warfare, because, if they prepare for hurricanes, if they prepare for whatever else, Well, hell, why wouldn't you prepare for a situation where there's a war? Don't you want to protect yourself? Don't you want to be, I mean, it would be like common sense. You'd want to bulletproof yourself at least a little bit. I mean, see, I have those tongue twister. I've got those AR 500 steel plates. Now those you can dump mag after mag after mag of most small arm ammunition into it, and you're basically impervious to most small arms. It's rated for like really strong calibers, like the 7.62 NATO. It can withstand those too, and 30-06. But that's pretty big stuff. But that makes you almost impervious to small arms. If you have stuff like that, you're going to last, statistically speaking, you're going to last a lot longer than somebody who doesn't. Because like I said, back in Bosnia or Kosovo, all the other places around the world where there's been conflicts, people that don't wear protective equipment get slaughtered. They get slaughtered, and they get slaughtered quick. They get put down quick, where they would have had a much better chance of making it had they just had something to upgrade their protection. Upgrade their protection. It's that easy. It's not like this stuff is with like far outside of people's price ranges. I mean, we're not talking that much money overall. I mean, my God. I mean, we're only talking literally like, several $100s. Can you invest several $100s into your own body protection? I would hope so. I would hope so. That's one of the most vital preps that everybody should have in their kit, is some good armor. I mean, every bit as much as you would a gas mask or whatever else. I mean, invest you about, $200-300 in a good set of body armor. You can buy it used, and it's probably a lot cheaper. And it's still good quality. Of course, they have dates on them where they claim it's out of date. But here's the thing: the industry has to do that by law. But here's the thing: it don't really go out of date. That's a crock of BS. It's not out of date. It'll last. It'll last. I mean, in the Army, we wore old body armor. We wore stuff from the 90s when we would go to the range, and I'm talking about our initial issue stuff that we had at Fort Hood before we traded it in for the ACU patterned armor, the new armor, the Gen 2 body armor. They called it the Gen 2. It was the Generation 2 body armor. It was in the ACU pattern, like the old the checkered pattern, like that. It looked like it blended in a gravel pit or a rock quarry. Like we looked like we were in like a rock quarry type of camouflage. You can see my old pictures from the Army where I'm wearing that. We had the new body armor. It was called the Generation 2 body armor. But before that, we had worn the old armor, and I'm saying from like the late 80s or early 90s, like Desert Storm time frame, or Panama, like 1989, like around the early 90s time frame, we wore that old body armor to the range, and guess what? It still was good body armor, otherwise we wouldn't have even used it. But that just goes to show you that, you can find you some really good deals out there. Now, I like European militaria because it's typically really good quality. It's ergonomic, meaning it's really friendly to the wearer or the user. Like if it's the armor, like the German armor is really ergonomic. It's really convenient. It's Velcro. Because the Gen 2 that we had that in the Army, when we got the newer stuff, it had a ripcord. So if you pulled the ripcord, the whole thing would fall apart. And it was a pain in the ass to put back together. They had a ripcord on it. Well, this stuff, the German stuff, has Velcro. You don't even have to worry about the ripcord getting snagged or anything or falling, making it fall apart on you while you're like out and about. That'd be a nightmare. I used to be scared of that in Iraq. I was like, man, what if one of these people runs up and pulls that cord and the whole thing falls off, and then I get peppered by some Haji with an AK or something, I didn't know what could happen, but the German stuff, it's all Velcroed, you can take it on and off with ease, the helmet I have an Italian paratrooper helmet. It's called a Sept 2, SEPT, and then 2. It's a Sept 2 paratrooper helmet. Yeah, they put a ripcord on it, Rebecca. I'm not even joking. I'm not even BSing you. That we really had that. That was on the Generation 2 body armor that they gave us when we went to get our issue for Iraq, our issue items. They gave us that, and they had a ripcord. If you pulled the ripcord, the whole thing fell apart while it was on you. See, this was their rationale behind that. Instead of using Velcro, they thought it was a good idea to just have a ripcord. So that way, if you got injured underneath your armor some kind of way, like if a piece of shrapnel went up under there some kind of way or cut you up and they had to like operate on you, their rationale was that you can pull the ripcord, the whole thing will come off, and then they could start operating on you. Really faulty design, really, really stupid. When all they had to do was do Velcro, you know? They could have just used Velcro. So yeah, Rebecca, yeah, it's ridiculous, it's ludicrous, but you definitely want to invest in your own protection. You want to invest in your own personal protection. You don't want to get peppered by some kind of rifle or machine gun or whatever. You don't want to get all like turned into Swiss cheese or cut down by shrapnel. Think about it. When there's either an internal sort of Syrian-style situation here, like in my documentaries, if we have an internal Syrian-style situation, you got all these different factions running amok, just totally just annihilating everything in their path, and you got a situation where you got psychos and kooks like the Mormon state getting their hands on chemical weapons, and you got like psychotic mass murderers like the National Salvation Revolutionary Front going around and doing purges and things. I mean, think about it. Think about how crazy this place could get. Every madman in a collapsed nation that has different WMDs is going to try to get their hands on those WMDs. And that's going to put a lot of people at risk. Major risk. Major. That was one of the big fears in Syria, because Syria allegedly has the fourth biggest chemical weapons stockpile on the entire earth. The fourth biggest. Fourth. Chemical weapons. That was the big fear in Syria during their civil conflict, was that the different groups, the different factions could get their hands on the chemical weapons and use them. And they very nearly did, they very nearly did. Assad, he almost lost his civil war. He almost lost his whole regime, and he should have had enough troops to hold down tiny little Syria. I mean, we're talking a nation that's not even like completely 2/3 as big as the state of California in landmass. And he in theory, he should have had the forces to be able to hold Syria down. What he started his civil war with, he had like almost 600,000. He had like 500-something thousand forces, between his army and his paramilitary forces. Should have been enough. It should have been enough, And then, of course, he had volunteers, like his Bath Party volunteers and everything. So really, it was probably up closer on the, like, near the million end of things. Maybe it was like 800-something thousand. But then he was fighting all these different factions who were very well armed. They raided armories. Then they got foreign help, from different nations. It just became a madhouse. It became a madhouse. Don't people realize that if America has a multi-factional internal conflict, which also in that I showed how Russia and China would contribute to the destabilization process. What did I show in that? I showed how Russia and China sent some very, very cheap mass-produced weaponry that didn't matter to them, like just small items, like small ticket items, like small arms and, grenades and, rockets and things like that. They sent them really cheap, easy to produce, like dime a dozen type of stuff. And they sent it to them, and they used it to help destabilize the country further. It wasn't like no major high-tech stuff. I mean, they sent a couple things like, air-to-ground rockets and, missiles like shoulder-fired, those man-portable air defense systems. They sent some of those, but then they mostly just sent anti-tank things. They sent a little bit of rocket artillery. They sent large-caliber air defense guns, which could also be used on, ground targets like the 57-millimeter cannons. They sent them, those NJ-230s, which are like the old school Chinese rocket trucks that shoot the 130 millimeter rockets out of like 12 pods on it. That's still pretty destructive, but it's not like they're like real high end stuff. It's easy and cheap to produce. It's not like it was like a issue for them to give a bunch of that stuff to destabilize us, weaken us further. And it did definitely contribute to that in that scenario. So don't people realize that stuff like that is going to be happening in a real situation like that? We're going to have foreign nations trying to destabilize us even further. They're going to support one faction or another, maybe a couple different ones, and have them pitted against each other and give, all these different groups whatever they can give them to make the situation as bad as humanly possible, to where it's where the great culling becomes a really, really ugly business, because now these different factions are getting weaponry to basically increase the level of the conflict, increase the size of the conflict. Like in the documentary, the National Salvation Revolutionary Front, their paramilitary thugs, their death squads, they turned into full-fledged, like, paramilitary divisions that were like their breakthrough forces, their fanatics that they would charge into battle and try to break through the enemy lines, punch holes through it. And they were like your fanatics, like your ultra-nationalist, secular humanist fanatics, like the SS or the Iraqi Republican Guard or the Chinese PAP or whatever, a paramilitary element. Well, they were parallel to the regular forces of the National Salvation Revolutionary Front. That's why they were a paramilitary element, but they were like the death squads. Then they turned into divisions, because the weapons that Russia and China sent in to destabilize America ended up arming those fanatics. And they used it, they used those items to horrible effect. I mentioned that in the Chicago battle, in the hypothetical, where they had the Battle of Chicago, where it was still fairly early in the Civil War, where they could use some of the trains, they used some of the railroads to bring in supplies for this big offensive, because the National Salvation Revolutionary Front had the agenda, the goal, the ultimate aim of clearing the whole Midwest of regime forces, including their islands of Chicago and Detroit. Well, they won at Chicago. They had a victory at Chicago. They took Chicago. But they did great damage when they used chemical weapons on Chicago. They killed 300,000 civilians in the southern end of the city because they used all those chemical shells. It was destructive. It was horrible. If you could imagine something like that in real life, can you imagine how savage that would be, how wicked that would be? Just a whole city getting just nerve gassed and people dying in horrible ways. Because some madmen, some psychos got a hold of chemical weapons, weapons of mass destruction. Then you had the Mormon state. They gave one of their Mormon proxy groups, they gave them that camper van with that nuclear warhead, and they drove it into San Diego, and boom, can you imagine stuff like that? Like how horrible that would be, how savage that would be? And one of the very first battles was the battle between the Mormon state and the NSRF, and it was the bloodiest battle in the whole Second American Civil Conflict, because they were the two most fanatical factions on the map, and they went up against each other. It was secular humanism versus religious fanaticism, and it was like an immovable object meets an unstoppable force, and it was like a near apocalyptic battle. They both had to back down because so many people had died in it. Like each side lost about 100,000 or more, and it was the bloodiest battle in the whole conflict. They maintained a rough force of about 30,000 on each side, but the reason why over 200,000 died was because they kept reinforcing their units at the front. They kept bringing in more people, more militias, to plug the gaps whenever other elements would be wiped out or annihilated. They would send in more troops by train or by truck to reinforce to keep their forces at a stable number. That's why so many perish, Yeah, it only looked like there was just under 70,000 troops involved when you take both sides of it, but in reality it was a lot more, because they kept having to replenish all the dead from all the units that got slaughtered. You had the crazy fanatics use. Okay, but take care, Rebecca. You have a great night. Yeah, they had the crazy fanatics of the NSRF dropping those barrel munitions from their cargo plane, and then you had the Mormon state retaliating with their 18-wheeler kamikaze trucks packed full of different items. I'll just say, it was a savage conflict. You would have stuff like that happening in a American Syrian style conflict. It would be a new paradigm. That's the whole point of everything I'm trying to explain here. It'd be an entirely new paradigm with new types of groups and everything involved. It would be madness. It would be total hell here. It would be total madness. It wouldn't be a Democrat Republican thing. No. Hell no. No. That would all be gone. When people are starving, when people can't work anymore, when people have no fuel, they can't live their normal day-to-day lives, do you think they're going to give a shit about some Democrat or Republican thing? No, because it's going to become about survival then. The old paradigms will melt and fall away to the wayside, and what will replace it is a bunch of madmen, a bunch of psychopaths, a bunch of, kooks and fanatics and everybody else coming out of the woodwork with their own ideologies, their own factions, and they're all going to be trying to fill a power vacuum created by the perfect storm of a weak central regime that cannot hold down its own nation, can hold down its woke areas, and that's about it, its woke loyalist areas, but that's about it. The rest of it would all fall apart. So what's everybody saying in here? Let's see. Hey, Priscilla, California Prepper, what's up, man? Let's see who's all in here. Well, I got 20 people in here. Wow, this late. Nobody's talking, though. Who's still in here? Anybody got anything they want to say? Otherwise, I'm going to get off here shortly, but I'm going to talk about one more thing. I'm going to talk about China and Russia. Not only would they destabilize us, but they would do it to increase the effectiveness of us ending up calling one another, and then that would lead to them invading. So, they would definitely invade us when they felt that we were sufficiently out of resources. Oh, hey, Mian from Canada, welcome. You're welcome here. But they would definitely invade us when we have been sufficiently weakened, and in their estimation, they want us so weak that they want us without any type of resources, no fuel remaining, no food remaining, nothing. They don't want us even being able to fight back when they come in. They want it that easy. Because you got to remember, the Chinese and Russians, the Eastern mindset is a mindset of austerity. Yes. Oh, thank you, Priscilla, and who else? And California Prepper. Thank you. And Mian, thank you. Yeah, they want us so weak that they could just basically just walk in here and take it with minimal losses. Minimal losses. You see, they're not all about wasting things. They don't like to waste resources. They only want to spend what they know they need to spend, and they don't want to spend a dollar more or a shilling more or a yuan more or a ruble more, whatever, a shekel. They don't want to spend a dime more than they need to. That's how austere they are. They're cheap. They're austere. They're frugal. That's just the way they are, They'll spend the bare minimum that they know they have to do, that's a must, that's something that they are required, but they don't want to ever go above and beyond what they already know they have to do as the bare minimum, because they're frugal, they're cheap, That's why they realize that, look, if we let them basically butcher one another, all their best fighting age men will be wiped out. They won't be able to form an effective guerrilla response. They'll be all out of resources. So when we're occupying their country, they won't be able to resist. We'll be able to get to colonizing it immediately with a bare minimum of trouble. Even though, despite the fact that those are very logical war plans, it doesn't necessarily mean it'll be exactly like they want it, but still, in their mindset, it is very logical. It does make sense, and it would make a big impact. It would really weaken us so that when they did invade, that occupation would be the easy part, because then they wouldn't have to worry about massive uprisings if all the best people slaughtered each other already. See, that's where they're coming from. This is going to be a Eurasian world when World War III is over, when Mystery Babylon USA is conquered. It is going to be a Chinese and Russian dominated world. Period. It is. That's exactly what it'll be. And they're going to be the two main kings of the 10 kings that rule with the beast. Because, the dragon, whether that's Satan or China can be the physical manifestation of the dragon that it mentions in Revelation, but the dragon can also be Satan as the spiritual, the spiritual aspect of it. So you can have Satan giving his power to the beast, and you can also have China giving his power to the beast, being that China is the dominant nation in the world right now, whether we like it or not. And I hate that. I hate it. I mean, what happened to us, man? That China has dominated us in every category. I mean, look at us now. Look at us. Look at us. Look at us. We're embarrassing now. We used to be something. And now we're nothing. Now China is worlds ahead of us. So is Russia, really, but China especially. China is the premier, most dominant, most powerful nation the world has ever known. And they're going to crush us and totally bury us in the dustbin of history. And it is such a shame that it came to this. But look at our country now. Look at who is in it. Look how people are acting. What has happened to us, man? What has happened to us? What the hell happened to us? Where did everything go wrong along the way? I mean, I really think that at times. I'm like, where the hell did everything go so wrong, Yeah, Priscilla. Yeah, I mean, look at it. I mean, it's disgusting. It's an abomination. This country is weak. It is incredibly weak now. It's weak. It's pathetic. It's weak. It's a joke because it's been allowed to get this bad. And we're going to get annihilated by the world superpower China and the second most powerful Russia. We're going to get annihilated. And we're going to be so weak when they come in, we're not even going to be able to lift a finger against them. That's how bad it'll be. It all makes sense now. When you go back to the old Dmitry Duduman prophecies, where he said that the American defense against the Chinese and Russian invasion, it'll look like World War II aircraft were trying to respond. Well, that's a good metaphor. As far as a vision goes, that's a good metaphor for how weak we would be. It's like he was saying that World War II era technology would be going up against modern, like ultra-modern advanced technology. So that's how weak we're going to be. That World War II tech is representing us as a weakened nation that has no way to really effectively defend itself when we get invaded. That's what that is saying. If you also go and look at the Duduman prophecies, one of them that really struck me was the one where the Russian and Chinese leader were talking. And they were talking about carving up America. And they're talking about it in real life now, and they have been. But in that vision that Duduman had, they were talking. And the Russian leader and some other leaders were saying to the Chinese leader, "We will fight for you." Like meaning that they're going to serve China. They're like China's like the leader, like they're the world superpower. They were saying, "We will fight for you," And then the Russian leader was saying, "Oh, I'll be able to do what I want with Europe." And he's like, telling the Chinese guy, he's like, "Well, you can have America and its people," and because that was their plan anyway. That was what China always ever wanted. They wanted to colonize the United States, the lower 48. They want the people as slaves or organ harvesting or sex slaves for their trafficking or wives for their troops or whatever, and they want the others for labor. Working their fields and working on projects in China or wherever they want their slaves working. That's what it's coming to. China is the premier, most powerful nation the world has ever known. They have the biggest industry the world has ever known. There's nobody that can come even close to them in steel production, which translates to military production, nor the number of military armaments factories they have, nor the number of combat aircraft they have, nor the number of the size of their whole navy, or the size of their army and gargantuan paramilitary, which is all combat trained, combat grade forces. We're talking 20 million paramilitary troops. Paramilitary. Then their reserves are 5 million, and their active military is 4 million. That's 29 million, folks. That's almost a flush 30 million. That's almost that's like that's insane. That is insane. That is insane. Like that is gargantuan. And their technology too. They've got fractional orbital bombardment systems for their nukes. They've got hypersonics. They can cloak their missiles. They're making miniature artificial stars. They lead the world in artificial intelligence and cyber warfare. They lead the world in just about every technological category. Directed energy weapons, all of it. China will bury us. Anti-satellite weapons. So you see, in my scenarios, in my invasion scenarios, when they invaded, they did a tandem cyber attack combined with the anti-satellite weapons. Their FK-2000s shot down the satellites. They gouged our eyes out, and they cut off our ears, basically. Our eyes and ears were gone. America was deaf, dumb, and blind when we got invaded in those documentaries because of what they did at the very beginning. They took down our eyes and ears. They totally disrupted and destroyed the grid, the communications, everything. They ruined all of it. And they downed the satellites. And they made us so incredibly weak that we had no way to coordinate any sort of effective response. There was no actionable intel by which it could be determined where enemies were coming from, because they were coming from everywhere, from Chinese Communist Party properties, CCP properties, located throughout the country as Trojans. Their units, their Trojan horse units that are on their CCP properties that have been there for years, were coming out of all those properties and seizing key strategic areas at a moment's notice, setting up logistical points for the externals rolling in from Canada and Mexico, beach landing, paradropping. It was such a fast-paced invasion, and it was over so quick, because there was no comms. There was no way to coordinate any sort of a defense. You can't do it without communications. How can you coordinate something when you can't even get in touch with people to coordinate something? How are you going to fight back when you have no way of gaining intelligence on the situation? You have no idea where your enemies are coming from. You don't know where they're going. You don't know what they even have. That's why reactionary people that run out and look for trouble are going to get annihilated, because they have no actionable intel. They don't know where the enemies are. They don't know where they're coming from, and they're going to get crushed. That's just the way it's going to be. You know, the smart people evacuated first. Then they waited for the occupation to set in before they even tried to do anything, you know, like in the stories and in the documentaries. So, you know, that just goes to show you this place is really in for some trouble. I'm going to see what people are saying before I call it a night. You know, if anybody has anything they want to say, any burning questions or anything else, please do say something, or forever hold your peace. Or at least till next time. I think I'm going to read tomorrow, though. Yeah, California Prepper. Weak men create hard times. Yeah. Yeah, it's all such a joke now. It's so terrible. Well, I love everybody. I'm glad everybody came. I went on for a good hour. I was going to read tonight, but it got kind of late, so I'll just do it tomorrow. I wrote a good part. Wrote part 9. It's a pretty long part, so I was just going to read part 9 by itself. It picks up where it left off with the Ann Arbor people, the people in Ann Arbor during the invasion. Yeah, I'll do the rest of that audiobook part tomorrow then, the part 9. Well, I love you all. Thank you for coming. Y'all have a blessed night.